Some mornings, you don't wake up because you're well rested. You wake up because your heart is racing, and you don't know why. The clock says 4:12 a.m. The house is dark. Still. You sit on the edge of the bed, feet touching the cold floor, waiting for the world to catch up with your breath. No sounds, no lights from the hallway. Just that soft hum of silence that feels heavier than noise. You stand up, slowly, carefully, because your legs aren't what they used to be. Your balance feels off. You reach for the edge of the dresser, just in case. It's not fear, not exactly. It's something worse. It's the feeling that if you fell right now, no one would know until morning. You walk into the kitchen. The fridge light feels too bright. The air too empty. You pour a glass of water, not because you're thirsty, but because it's something to do. The cup fogs in your hand. You take one sip and set it down. You're not sure what woke you. The heart pounding? The ache in your calves? The old familiar weight in your chest? You're not dying, but you're not really living either. In another house, miles away, a bigger house, a louder name, an older man is pacing the halls of the White House with the same sleepless stare. He was once called the most powerful man in the world, but tonight, he feels hollow. He picks up a photo, smiling, thumbs up. The crowd behind him once made him feel invincible. Now it makes him feel old, outdated, like someone clapping for a version of himself that doesn't exist anymore. He walks down the hallway and hears it. A whisper. Soft. Not from the television. Not from a phone. It's a boy's voice. His son. Praying. He doesn't open the door. He doesn't speak. He just listens. And what he hears will change him. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice in the dark, quietly saying your name when you didn't even know you needed to hear it. And maybe that's what this video is really about. Not politics. Not power, not headlines. It's about the part of life we rarely talk about. The moment when you realize you don't need to be strong all the time. You don't need to win every fight. Sometimes, you just need someone to whisper. You don't have to do this alone. In the next few chapters, we're going to walk with that man, and maybe see a little of ourselves in him. And by the end, I'll show you how even simple, quiet changes, no prescriptions needed, no grand speeches, can help you wake up each morning with a steadier heart and a softer step. Let's begin. Sometimes the most powerful words are the ones you were never meant to hear. The hallway was dark. Just beyond the door, a boy was kneeling by his bed, his voice low, his words unpolished. Not a rehearsed bedtime prayer, but something messier, rawer, real. God, he whispered, I don't know if you hear me, but I think maybe you do. I think maybe you still care about people, even when they stop caring back. Donald Trump stood frozen, not the president, not the businessman, just a father who hadn't expected to be prayed for. He didn't knock, didn't open the door, didn't say a word. He just listened, as if hearing his son for the very first time. I know I'm not supposed to ask for things just for me, so I won't, but I want to ask for my dad. That line pierced deeper than any headline, any debate, any business deal. Because beneath it was love. Quiet, uncertain love. The kind a child offers even when a parent doesn't always earn it. And in that moment, something inside Trump, something hardened by decades of needing to be the strongest man in every room, began to soften. Not shatter, just shift. Why does this matter to you? Because maybe, like Trump, you've spent a lifetime being strong, being needed, being the rock. But as the years go on, something happens that no one warns us about. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. That's what many seniors feel. You raised children, ran homes, worked long hours. You were the one others leaned on. But now, who whispers for you in the hallway? Who prays for you? Not just your health, not your prescriptions, but your soul. Let me tell you about Frank. Frank is 76, a retired postal worker. Still drives himself to the store, still pays his bills. But at night, he doesn't sleep much. He told me, "I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid no one will notice when I'm gone." And when I asked him when he last felt truly seen, he paused for a long time, then said, "My grandson said grace at dinner a few months ago. He thanked God for me, and I didn't even know he noticed I was there." There's something profoundly human about being prayed for. Not fixed, not told what to do, just remembered. Trump wasn't changed by a strategy, or a doctor, or a crisis. He was changed by being seen in silence. Trump steps back from the door, eyes stinging, not because of what he heard, but because of what it woke up in him. So if you've been feeling like no one notices you anymore, like your strength is fading and no one sees what it costs you to get up each morning, stay with me. In the next part, we'll talk about why our bodies start to ache when our emotions have been bottled up too long, and how just simple changes, no prescriptions needed, can help you feel more grounded and cared for. And maybe, just maybe, you'll feel seen too. Sometimes, the pain in your legs isn't from walking too far, it's from carrying too much for too long. That night, after hearing Barron's prayer, Trump didn't go back to sleep. He didn't scroll through news, didn't call an aide. He just sat at his desk, glass of melted ice untouched, and stared into the dark. There was a weight in his chest that he hadn't felt in years, and it wasn't anger, it wasn't ambition. It was something older, something that had been trying to speak through his body for a long, long time. For many older adults, the aches and cramps, the racing heart, the shallow breaths at 3 a.m., they're not always just medical. They're messages. Doctors often treat symptoms with pills. But what if the real issue isn't cholesterol or blood sugar? What if your heart pounds at night because you've been running from emotions too long? What if your legs cramp because they're holding tension from decades of pretending you were okay? Here's what the science says. When we suppress emotions, fear, grief, loneliness, they don't disappear. They store in the body. A study from Harvard found that people who regularly suppress emotional expression have higher rates of chronic inflammation, fatigue, and circulatory issues. The body literally holds on to what the heart won't release. That might explain why some nights your calves tighten for no reason, or why you feel dizzy when standing still, not because of your inner ear, but because something inside you has been off balance for a long time. Now meet Diane. She's 70, lives alone in Minnesota, lost her husband 8 years ago. She takes her vitamins, stays active, eats oatmeal every morning, but at night she has leg cramps so intense she cries out loud. Doctors gave her magnesium. It helped a little. But the real change came when her granddaughter came over one evening, sat beside her and said, "Grandma, do you miss Grandpa?" "Because I do." Diane didn't answer. She just cried for the first time in years. That night, for the first time in months, her legs didn't cramp. The body will scream what the soul whispers. And what Barron's prayer did in that quiet hallway was give Trump permission to stop pretending. He didn't speak. He didn't respond. But something in him let go. Just a little. And in that moment, the burden began to shift from muscle to memory, from tension to truth. Trump opens the bottom drawer of his desk and takes out a Bible from his mother, the leather worn, the pages stiff. Inscribed on the inside, "To Donald, may you never forget where strength truly comes from. Love, Mom." Maybe today you're carrying things no one else sees. Regrets, resentments, old guilt, old silence. You don't need to confess them. You don't need a diagnosis. But you might need one thing: to let your body rest from holding it all. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how even one small act, like sharing a quiet meal or writing a simple letter, can start to release that weight. No prescriptions needed, just presence. It wasn't the food, it wasn't the conversation, it was the silence, and who chose to stay in it. That evening, Trump did something unusual. He asked the kitchen to make 2 plates of whatever Barron was having. No grand meal, no staff meeting, no cameras. Just a father, walking up the stairs with a tray in hand. He knocked. Barron opened the door, surprised. "Mind if I join you?" "For what?" "Dinner." They sat on the couch, plates on their laps. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. No one tried to fix anything. No one asked hard questions. No one gave a speech. They just shared space. And for the first time in months, it didn't feel awkward. It felt real. Here's the truth. When you're over 65, silence becomes a companion. Sometimes comforting, sometimes crushing. You eat alone, you move slower, you don't talk much, not because you have nothing to say, but because who's really listening? So when someone chooses to sit beside you, not to entertain, not to fix, not to rush, but just to be there, that's healing. Let me introduce you to Carol. She's 68, widowed, lives in Ohio. She told me that she's learned to cook for one, but every Sunday, she still sets a second plate. One Sunday, her neighbor's teenage son knocked on her door. He brought her banana bread. She invited him to stay. He said, "Sure." They sat, ate, didn't say much. When he left, she whispered, "That was the first meal I've shared with someone in almost a year." And that night, she slept through till morning. Because when someone chooses to sit beside your silence, you remember you still exist. Still matter. Still belong. Back in the room, Trump broke the quiet. "You ever pray before dinner?" Barron nodded. "Sometimes." Trump replied, "I used to. When I was your age, my mother made me." Barron smiled a little, a small crack in the wall, a breath shared between generations. Trump stares at his plate, then gently clears his throat and says, "Last night, I heard you." Barron doesn't flinch. He simply says, "I didn't know you felt that way." And Trump, a man who's been quoted 1,000,000 times, replies, "You never asked." You see, it's not about dinner. It's about choosing to sit with someone. Not to impress, not to teach, but to say with your presence, "You matter, I'm here." In the next chapter, we'll explore how writing a letter, one you may never send, can unlock something your voice has forgotten how to say. Because healing doesn't always need volume. Sometimes it just needs honesty. Some words are too heavy to say out loud, so we write them down and hope someone understands anyway. Later that night, after the quiet dinner with Barron, Trump went back to his study. No staff, no calls, just the hum of the White House in the dark, and something pressing on his chest that wasn't political. It was personal. He opened a drawer, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and stared at the blank page for a long time. He wasn't writing a speech, not a tweet, not a press statement. He was writing to his son. The pen moved slowly. "You see more than I thought," he wrote, "and you reminded me of something I was scared to admit. That strength isn't the same as noise. I'm not good at quiet things, but I want to try. Thank you for believing in someone who forgot how to listen." He folded the letter gently, placed it in a plain envelope, didn't seal it, didn't sign it. That night, he walked into Barron's room while the boys slept and left the letter on the nightstand. Like a prayer, unseen, but meant. Why does this matter to you? Because maybe you too have things you haven't said. To your son, to your daughter, to someone you love, but don't know how to reach anymore. Not because you don't care, but because after a certain age, some feelings are easier to write than to speak. Let's talk about Harold. He's 74, lost his wife 9 years ago. Every week, he writes a letter to her. Not long, just a few lines. He folds them, puts them in a little box by her photo. He told me, I know she's gone, but when I write, I remember who I was with her, not just what I've become without her. That ritual doesn't change the world, but it changes him. And sometimes that's enough. You see, the body remembers what the heart avoids, and sometimes the act of writing, even if no one reads it, helps you process grief, regret, even hope. It's not about whether they'll respond. It's about freeing a truth that's been stuck in your chest for too long. The dim lamp beside Baron's bed glows softly. A single envelope sits quietly beside a water glass. Not flashy, not dramatic, but a man who once built towers is now building something smaller and far more important: trust. So maybe tonight you can write too. It doesn't need to be fancy, doesn't need to be shared. Just one note, one memory, one sentence you've been carrying for years. Because healing doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with writing down what your soul already knows. In the next chapter, we'll walk with Trump as he revisits someone he hasn't spoken to in months, and how one phone call can reopen a doorway to family, memory, and quiet redemption. Before there were titles, power, or headlines, there was someone who simply called him Donnie. The letter to Baron was written. The envelope left quietly on a nightstand, but the restlessness didn't fade. So the next morning, Trump did something no one expected. He picked up the phone and called his sister, Marianne. They hadn't spoken in over 6 months. Not because of a fight, just life, pride, and the slow drift that happens when you stop calling family and start calling advisors. She answered with her usual dry humor. Well, either the market's crashing, or you're finally sick of steak. Trump paused, then said quietly, I'm checking in. The conversation wasn't long, not heavy, but somewhere in the middle he asked the question that had been tugging at him since Baron's prayer. What do you think Mom would say about me now? Marianne didn't rush to answer. She waited, then said she'd be proud of your fight, but she'd worry about your heart. Trump didn't speak right away. He was staring at the floor, but in his mind he was back in Queens, back in the small bedroom with the flowered wallpaper, back when his mother would sit beside his bed after she thought he was asleep. She used to check on me at night, he muttered. Marianne said gently, No, Donnie, you just pretended to be asleep. This is what memory sounds like. Not loud, not rehearsed. Just two siblings, one old question, and a flood of emotions they didn't know they'd been waiting to release. Why does this matter to you? Because sometimes, when you're older, you stop calling the people who knew you before you became who the world expected. You grow distant, not out of anger, but because life teaches us to armor up, even with family. But underneath that armor is still the child who wants to hear. You're still lovable. You haven't drifted too far. Let me tell you about Eleanor. She's 78, has 3 grown children, but her closest bond is with her older brother, Walter. They didn't talk for nearly a year, until one Christmas morning she called and simply said, I was just wondering if you remembered the snowball fight we had in 1959. Walter laughed, then cried. They talked for 2 hours, not about politics, not about the present, just about who they used to be, and how much of that is still in them. Sometimes healing doesn't start with forgiveness, it starts with remembering. Transition image. Trump sits alone on the Truman balcony, a soft breeze brushing the edge of his shirt. He whispers, not to the press, not to his staff, but to the sky. Are you listening now? Because maybe your mother's not here anymore. Maybe your brother's voice is only in letters. Maybe you haven't spoken to your sister in too long. But the truth is, you haven't forgotten them. And you've wondered what they would say if they saw you now, not just the outside, but the inside. In the next part, we'll join Trump as he makes an unexpected trip, not to a rally, not to a boardroom, but back to the very sidewalk where he first learned how to be small. And why going back is sometimes the only way to move forward. You can leave your childhood home behind, but sometimes it's the only place that remembers who you were before the world changed you. 3 hours outside of Washington, a black SUV pulled off the highway and into a quiet neighborhood in Jamaica Estates, Queens. No press, no security detail, no fanfare. Just a father and a son, seated side by side in the back seat. One staring out the window, the other finally slowing down enough to look back. Barron leaned forward as the car stopped. "Wait, is this where you grew up?" Trump nodded, slowly. It was a modest 2-story brick home, the same front lawn, the same window with the white curtains his mother had sewn. "I used to climb out of that window," he muttered, "when I didn't want to go to church." Barron raised an eyebrow. "Did they catch you?" Trump chuckled. "My mother didn't say anything. She just handed me the Bible and said, 'If you're going to skip church, at least talk to God yourself.'" They stood in silence for a moment. 2 generations, 1 patch of sidewalk, and 100 memories echoing through the cracks in the concrete. Why does this matter to you? Because when you're older, going home can be bittersweet. The house might still be there, but the people are not, and neither are the versions of yourself you left behind. Yet somehow, the walls remember, the scent of the hallway, the weight of the banister, the sound of your father's polished shoes on Sunday morning. Going back doesn't erase the pain, but it helps you understand it. Meet George. He's 80, a retired mechanic, lives in upstate New York. He told me that after his wife died, he avoided their old neighborhood for 5 years. One day his daughter asked him to drive past the diner where he'd proposed. He agreed. He didn't go in, didn't take a photo, just sat in the car, stared at the sign, and whispered, "I remember you." That night, he said he finally slept without waking up in tears. Because places don't just hold memories, they hold meaning. Trump and Barron continued walking. They passed the old Presbyterian church, the one where he was baptized, still standing. Red brick, ivy climbing the stained glass like it was still trying to reach heaven. "I don't remember the sermon," Trump said. Barron asked, "Then what do you remember?" Trump stared at the steps, then said, "My father's shoes, shiny, polished. I couldn't stop staring at them instead of the preacher." Father and son walking past the old sidewalk, no reporters, no crowds, just the wind, the leaves, and a man remembering who he used to be before expectations wore him down. Maybe there's a sidewalk like that for you too. A house, a park bench, a church pew, a place that doesn't belong to the world, just to you. And maybe it's time to return, not to stay, but to reclaim the version of you that still believed in softness, in silence, and in starting over. In the next part, they'll visit a place more sacred than any office or monument, the grave of Trump's mother. And what happens there will show that you can be 70, 80, even 90 years old, and still discover something tender you thought you'd forgotten forever. Some words only come to us when the person we needed to hear them is no longer here. After visiting the church, Trump asked the driver to make one more stop. No staff knew, not even Barron. They pulled up to a quiet cemetery. The wind stirred gently through the trees. The air smelled of grass, of stone, of memory. Barron looked up. "Who's here?" Trump didn't answer right away. He simply stepped out of the car and walked forward, eyes fixed on a familiar headstone. Mary Ann McLeod Trump. His mother. The grass was neatly trimmed, the stone was clean, but the man standing in front of it felt anything but put together. Barron stood a few feet back, and slowly, Trump knelt. He placed one hand gently on the stone. No grand gesture, no rehearsed line, just a whisper. I think I forgot how to be small, but I'm remembering now. I heard your voice in my son's. You would have liked him. His voice cracked. He wiped away a tear. No cameras, no audience. Just grief. Arriving later than expected, but still welcome. Why does this matter to you? Because maybe you too have people you never got to say enough to. Or maybe you said the words, but not in the way your heart meant them. You carry them in your chest. You visit graves and wonder, can they hear me now? And maybe, just maybe, part of aging is learning that even if it's too late to say it perfectly, it's never too late to say it at all. Let me tell you about Linda. She's 72. Lost her father when she was 20. Never got to say goodbye. One day, walking past a small memorial wall in her church, she saw his name. She sat on the pew in front of it, closed her eyes, and said out loud, I forgive you, and I wish you'd known how much I wanted to be seen. She told me that afterward something inside her let go. Not all the pain, but the weight. And for the first time in 50 years, she felt like she could breathe without armor. Because kneeling doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means you're brave enough to lay down what no longer serves you. Trump remains kneeling by the grave. Barren, quiet, watching. The sky dimming into a golden dusk. A man who once stood on world stages, now simply present, and small in the most human way. That night they drove back to Washington. No headlines broke. No press leaked the story. But something had changed between them. Not in politics, not in position, but in presence. And in the next part, something even rarer happens. Barron asks to go to church together. Not as a performance, but as a way of saying, let's keep walking this road together. You don't have to believe in everything. You just have to be willing to sit beside someone who does. The Sunday after their trip, Barron did something unexpected. He looked across the breakfast table and said, would you come to church with me today? Trump paused. Only if I get to pick the hymn, he replied with a half smile. Barron smirked. You don't know any hymns. Trump shrugged. Then I'll make one up. And for the first time in a very long time, they laughed. Not politely, not performatively, but the kind of laugh that comes from two people who finally decided to stop hiding from each other. Later that morning, they walked into a small chapel near the edge of the city. No security press team, no photographers, just two men, one younger, one older, sliding into a back pew. They didn't kneel right away. They didn't sing loudly. But they sat quietly, together. Why does this matter to you? Because after a certain age, walking into church again can feel strange. Not because you don't believe, but because you've changed. The world has changed. And faith doesn't always fit in the same way it used to. Maybe you've been away for years. Maybe you pray in your own way in your kitchen with the radio on and your hands in dishwater. Or maybe you miss the peace that used to wash over you when someone simply said, let us bow our heads. This moment between Trump and Barron wasn't about tradition. It wasn't about redemption. It was about permission to believe again, even if clumsily, to pray again, even if awkwardly, to be new again, even if late in life. Let me tell you about Robert. He's 85. A veteran. Hadn't set foot in a church since 1979. One day his great-granddaughter asked if he'd come to her choir recital at the chapel. He sat in the back, arms folded, didn't sing, didn't stand. But afterward, when the pastor walked by, Robert said, that stained glass still lets the same light in. And the pastor replied, so does your heart. Because it's never really too late to come home, not to a building, but to peace, to hope, to presence. Back in the chapel, the service ended. People trickled out, Barron turned to his father and asked, "Did you pray?" Trump looked at the altar, then said, "Not out loud, but yeah, I said something." Barron nodded, and that was enough. The camera lingers on the back pew, now empty. Two impressions still visible on the worn cushion. A Bible left open on the bench, turned not to commandments but to Psalms, gentle, ancient, still waiting for someone to whisper, "Amen." In the next and final part of this journey, Trump writes a second letter. Not to Barron, not to the country, but to someone he lost a long time ago, his brother Fred. And in that letter, he discovers something every older soul longs to know. It's not too late to heal, even the parts of yourself you buried decades ago. Some of the most important conversations in life happen long after the other person is gone. That evening, long after the chapel had emptied and Barron had gone to bed, Trump sat alone in his study. No news on, no staff waiting, no voice in his ear, just the sound of his pen scratching against a clean sheet of paper, his second letter. This one wasn't for Barron, not for Melania, not for the country. It was for Fred, his older brother, gone for decades, lost to addiction, to pain, to silence that never got filled. He wrote slowly, "I didn't understand you back then. I thought strength meant hiding. I thought winning meant never showing fear. But I think I'm starting to understand now. I wish I could go back. I wish I prayed with you the way my son prays for me. I didn't know what love looked like when it was quiet. Now I do. I'm sorry." He folded the letter, didn't label it, didn't file it. Instead, he placed it in the back of his mother's Bible, tucked between Psalms and a fading photo of two boys in matching jackets. Why does this matter to you? Because maybe there's a Fred in your life, someone you didn't know how to reach, someone you lost, not just to death, but to misunderstanding or distance or time. And maybe you've wondered, what would I say to them now if I had one more chance? You don't need a grave to speak your truth. You don't need a perfect moment. You just need to be willing to open that drawer, take out a pen, and say what your heart has been holding on to for years. Let me tell you about Gloria. She's 81, a retired music teacher. Her sister passed in 2014 after they hadn't spoken in nearly 20 years. One night, Gloria sat down and wrote a letter. She ended it with, "If you're somewhere you can hear this, I was wrong to stop calling, and I still remember the way you laughed during storms." She read it aloud, once, then burned it. She didn't feel relief, she felt release. And she told me for the first time in decades I could sing again without crying. Because healing isn't about getting it perfect, it's about getting it out. Trump closes the Bible. His hand rests gently on the cover, no longer a prop, no longer for show, just a son, a brother, a father, finally quiet enough to be real. The letter rests inside, unseen but meant. The next morning, Barron finds another note on his desk. Short, no flourish, it says, "I may never be perfect, but if God hears prayers like yours, maybe there's still hope for guys like me." That evening, they sit side by side on the Truman balcony again. 2 mugs of cocoa, no big talk. Barron breaks the silence. "You really talked about me in your speech?" Trump smiles. "I did." "Were you nervous?" "Terrified." Barron sips his cocoa. "Did you pray before going up?" Trump thinks, then says, "I said, let me speak like the boy who reminded me how." Barron looks at him. "Do you still pray for me?" "Even when you don't hear me," Trump replies. A pause. Then softly Barron says, "Will you let me teach you how to do it right?" Trump looks out at the darkening sky, then back at his son. "Sure," he says. "You already started. Maybe you're not a president, maybe you never built towers, maybe your life didn't make headlines. But if you've ever felt the ache of regret, the sting of silence, or the weight of an apology that never got spoken, you're not alone. And it's not too late." You don't need cameras, you don't need speeches, you don't even need the perfect words. You just need to start. One prayer, one letter, one moment of presence. Because change doesn't come with trumpets, it comes with whispers, like the one your heart's been waiting to hear. Type 1 if you've ever wanted to say, "I'm sorry," but didn't know how to start. Type 2 if you've ever wished for one last chance to speak to someone you've lost. And if this video touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a quiet whisper of hope today. If you're still here, maybe this story touched something deep inside you. And if it did, maybe someone else out there needs to hear it too. So if you'd like to keep walking with us, if you'd like more stories that speak quietly but carry weight, consider subscribing. Not to follow a person, but to return to a space where things feel slower, softer, and more honest, where your voice matters, and your presence is always welcome.